Hi, Rachel here. I knew something was wrong the moment my stepson asked a simple question at Thanksgiving dinner. Where should I sit? Everyone at the table went quiet. My mother looked at the chairs and said there wasn't one for him. Not because the table was full, but because, according to her, he wasn't really family. What happened next ended my relationship with my entire family, and it started with a single empty seat. The drawing was already on the fridge when I got home that afternoon. I noticed it before I even put my bag down. Our kitchen was small, the kind where the table almost touched the counter, and the fridge was covered in magnets from places Ethan and I had never actually visited. Most of them were souvenirs from school trips or little roadside stops we made when Noah insisted we pull over for ice cream. But this drawing was new. It was taped right in the center of the door, slightly crooked. 3 stick figures stood in front of a house with a bright red roof. The sky was blue. The grass was green. There were flowers that looked more like colorful explosions than actual flowers. Above the figures, written in big, uneven letters, were 2 words: my family. I knew immediately who the 3 people were supposed to be. The tall one with the square shoulders was Ethan. The smaller one with the messy brown hair was Noah. And the one in the middle, with long yellow lines for hair, was me. I was still looking at it when I heard the chair scrape behind me. "Don't move," Noah said. I turned slowly. He was standing on one of the kitchen chairs, holding a strip of tape in his mouth and another drawing in his hands. His hair stuck up in the back the way it always did when he forgot to brush it properly before school. "Is it straight?" he asked. "It's perfect," I said. He leaned forward carefully and pressed the second corner of the paper down. Then he climbed off the chair like he had just finished an important job. 9 years old, and he already took decorating very seriously. He stepped back beside me and folded his arms, studying the fridge. "Now it looks like a real family fridge," he said. I smiled. "What did it look like before?" "Just magnets." He pointed to the drawing. "Now it has us." The word "us" landed softly in the kitchen. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then Noah turned his head toward me. "Do you think Grandma Carter will like it?" The question came out casually, like it had already been answered in his mind. I felt something small tighten in my chest. "Why do you ask?" I said. He shrugged. "Because she's going to see it when she comes over." "She's coming over?" "Not today," he said quickly. "For Thanksgiving." He said the word Thanksgiving like it was something exciting and official. This would be the first Thanksgiving since Ethan and I got married. The first time Noah would be spending the holiday with my side of the family. He walked over to the counter and grabbed the apple he'd left there earlier. "I told Mrs. Alvarez that we're going to Grandma's house," he said between bites. "Mrs. Alvarez was his teacher." "What did she say?" I asked. "That Thanksgiving is about family," he said. He said it like he was repeating a fact from a textbook. Then he looked back at the drawing again. "I think Grandma Carter will like the flowers," he added. I nodded slowly. Grandmas usually like flowers. That seemed to satisfy him. He finished the apple and tossed the core into the trash with a confidence that suggested he had been practicing that shot. Then he ran down the hallway toward his room. "I'm going to draw the cousins next," he called. His bedroom door slammed. The kitchen fell quiet again. I stayed standing in front of the fridge. The drawing was simple. 3 stick figures, 1 house, 2 words written across the top: my family. I reached up and pressed the tape down more firmly. Sometimes children believe things with a certainty adults lose somewhere along the way. To Noah, the picture made perfect sense. He lived in our house. He ate dinner at our table. Ethan helped him with homework. I packed his lunches and reminded him to brush his teeth. We were his family. That was the whole story, or at least the whole story in our house. I heard Ethan's truck pull into the driveway a few minutes later. The front door opened and closed. He stepped into the kitchen still wearing his work boots, carrying the smell of cold air and sawdust with him. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He set his keys down on the counter and followed my gaze to the fridge. "Oh," he said quietly. "New artwork?" "Noah just put it up." Ethan studied the drawing for a moment. I watched his expression soften. "Pretty accurate," he said. "Except I don't think my shoulders are that square." I laughed. "He gave you heroic proportions." Ethan stepped closer to the fridge. His finger hovered near the paper but didn't touch it. "3 people," he said. "Looks about right." I nodded. "Looks right to me, too." He leaned back against the counter and crossed his arms. "Did he ask about Thanksgiving again?" "Yes." Ethan sighed. "Kid's been counting the days." "I know." We stood there quietly for a moment. Then Ethan looked at me. "You okay?" he asked. The question wasn't random. He knew my family. He knew how things could feel, complicated around them. "I'm fine," I said. And in that moment, I believed it. Thanksgiving had always been a big deal in my parents' house. Too many dishes, too many people talking at once, kids running between the rooms while my mother tried to keep the schedule on track. It was loud, it was chaotic, but it was still family. And this year, Noah would be part of it. That was what I told myself. Down the hallway, I heard Noah talking to himself while he drew. Every few seconds, he called out another update. "I'm adding Emma." "And Lucas." "And the dog." Ethan smiled. "He's planning the whole reunion." Apparently, Ethan pushed himself away from the counter and grabbed a glass from the cabinet. "You think your mom's going to do the place cards again this year?" he asked. "She always does." "Like a wedding reception?" "Exactly like a wedding reception." He nodded slowly. "Well," he said, taking a drink of water, "I guess Noah will get his first official Carter place card." I looked at the drawing again. 3 stick figures, 1 house, 2 words, my family. And standing there in that quiet kitchen, with Noah drawing cousins in the next room and Ethan leaning against the counter beside me, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Sometimes the hardest moments in a story begin in the most ordinary places. A quiet kitchen, a child with a box of crayons, a drawing on the fridge that makes perfect sense to the person who made it, because they still believe the world works the way it's supposed to, and at that moment, so did I. A week later, I was standing in my parents' dining room, staring at a stack of place cards that hadn't been meant for me to see. My mother had always treated Thanksgiving like a small military operation. There were schedules, there were lists, there were color-coded notes taped inside the pantry. When we were kids, my brother Daniel used to joke that if the president ever needed someone to organize a national emergency dinner, he should call my mother. Nothing about the house had changed since then. The dining room still smelled faintly like lemon polish. The long wooden table still stretched almost the entire length of the room, and above it the same chandelier hung low enough that my father had bumped his head on it at least twice every holiday. I had come by that afternoon the way I often did, to drop off a grocery bag, to check if my parents needed anything, to make sure my father had taken the blood pressure pills he always forgot. For years that had simply been part of my routine. Ethan teased me about it sometimes. "You're basically their unpaid home nurse," he said once. He wasn't entirely wrong. My mother's arthritis had gotten worse over the last few years, and my father's doctor appointments seemed to multiply every season. So I helped. I filled out insurance forms. I drove them to appointments when needed, and every month I quietly transferred a few $100s to their account to help cover prescription costs. None of that had ever felt like a burden. It just felt like being a daughter. When I walked into the dining room that afternoon, my mother was sitting at the table with a yellow legal pad and a black pen. A row of small white cards sat beside her. She didn't look up when I entered. "Rachel," she said, still writing, "you're early." "I brought the groceries you asked for." "In the kitchen?" "Yes." "Good." She finished writing on the card in front of her and placed it carefully at the edge of the table. I walked closer without really thinking about it. The table was already partly set, plates stacked neatly, silverware wrapped in napkins, and along the center of the table sat a neat line of place cards. Emma, Lucas, Ben, Maya, all of my nieces and nephews. My mother always arranged the children together along one side of the table. The cousins' row, she liked to call it. I picked up one of the cards. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, precise, careful, almost formal. "Looks organized," I said. "It has to be," she replied. "There will be 12 of us this year." I did the quick math automatically. My parents, Daniel and his wife, Olivia and her husband, 4 kids, me, Ethan, and Noah. "That's 13, I said. My mother's pen stopped moving, only for a second. Then she continued writing on the card in front of her. "No," she said calmly. 12. Something in my stomach shifted slightly. I looked back at the cards. Emma, Lucas, Ben, Maya. I scanned the rest. Daniel, Olivia, Robert, Margaret. My eyes moved through the names again, slowly this time. I didn't see the one I was looking for. I picked up the stack of blank cards beside my mother. "Did you forget, Noah?" I asked. My mother finally looked up, not startled, not confused, just mildly inconvenienced. "We'll see how the table fits," she said. "That's not what I asked." She capped the pen and set it down carefully. "Rachel," she said patiently, "I'm still arranging the seating." I held one of the blank cards between my fingers. "You've already written the other kids. They're your brother and sister's children." Her tone was neutral, but the words landed harder than they should have. "Noah is Ethan's son," I said. "Yes." "He lives in our house." "Yes. He's coming to Thanksgiving." My mother folded her hands on the table. "We'll see how things settle." I stared at her. Across the room, the old wall clock ticked loudly. I suddenly noticed something else. There were 12 chairs around the table, not 13. "Mom," I said slowly, "you counted the chairs already." She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up and began straightening the napkins. "You worry too much," she said. "I'm just planning dinner." I looked down at the cards again. Emma, Lucas, Ben, Maya, all neatly written, all placed exactly where they would sit. I slid one of the blank cards out of the stack. "Want me to write Noah's?" I asked. My mother reached over and took the card gently from my hand. "No," she said. "I'll handle it." She placed the blank card back onto the pile. Then she picked up the grocery list from the table. "Did you remember the cranberries?" she asked. The conversation had shifted, just like that, like a door quietly closing. "Yes," I said. "They're in the bag." "Good." She moved toward the kitchen. I stayed where I was, looking at the table, looking at the place cards. Something about the scene felt slightly off. But I told myself it was nothing. Families are messy. Holidays are stressful. Maybe she really hadn't finished arranging everything yet. Maybe she was just distracted. Maybe the extra chair was still in the garage. The logical explanations lined up quickly, because the alternative explanation required a different kind of thinking, and I wasn't ready for that yet. From the kitchen, my mother called out, "Rachel, can you bring the apples in here?" I picked up the grocery bag and walked toward the doorway. But as I passed the table, my eyes drifted back one more time. 12 chairs, 12 place cards, and a small stack of blank ones sitting untouched beside my mother's pen, waiting, or maybe not waiting at all. Thanksgiving morning started the way most quiet mornings in our house did, with Noah talking before anyone else had fully woken up. I heard his feet running down the hallway while the coffee machine was still sputtering its first cup. The sun had barely come up, and the kitchen window was fogged slightly from the cold outside. "Rachel," he called. He still used my name most of the time, not because anyone had told him to, just because that was how things had always been. I turned from the stove where I was warming butter in a small saucepan. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," he said, sliding into the kitchen in socks. He was already dressed, blue button-down shirt, khaki pants, hair mostly brushed, mostly. Ethan walked in behind him, still pulling a sweatshirt over his head. "Kid's been awake since 6, he said. "It's Thanksgiving," Noah replied quickly. Like that explained everything. He hopped onto one of the kitchen chairs and leaned over the counter to look into the mixing bowl. Is that the pie? Yes. Can I help? You already helped, I said. You peeled the apples. I peeled 2 apples. That counts. He leaned closer. I think Grandma Carter will like it. There was that sentence again. I kept stirring the filling slowly. Probably, I said. Noah seemed satisfied with that answer. He jumped down from the chair and ran into the living room. A moment later, we heard the television turn on. Cartoons. Ethan poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter. You nervous? He asked. About dinner? About your mom? I shrugged. It'll be fine. He studied my face for a moment. You sure? Yes. It was the answer I had been repeating in my head all week. It'll be fine. Families adjust. People get used to things. Noah had been part of our life for almost 2 years now, and my parents had met him plenty of times. They weren't cruel people. They were just traditional. That was the word everyone used when they talked about my mother. Traditional. Ethan took another sip of coffee. Well, he said, I'll be a little late getting there. I looked up. What? Site manager called this morning. One of the subcontractors didn't lock down equipment last night. You're working today? Just for an hour. He held up a hand quickly. I'll meet you there before dinner starts. Noah appeared in the doorway again. Are we leaving soon? In a little while, I said. He looked at Ethan. You're coming too, right? Of course. I want you to see the cousins. Ethan smiled. I've seen them before. Yeah, but now we're all eating together. The certainty in his voice made Ethan glance toward me briefly. Noah didn't notice. He ran back to the living room. Ethan lowered his voice. You want me to come with you instead? He asked. I can check the site later. No, I said. It's fine. Rachel, it's fine. The words came out more firmly than I intended. Ethan nodded slowly. All right. I finished assembling the pie and slid it into the oven. The smell of cinnamon filled the kitchen almost immediately. Thanksgiving had always smelled like cinnamon in my parents' house, and roasted turkey, and whatever cranberry thing my sister Olivia insisted on bringing every year. Noah wandered back in a few minutes later, carrying a piece of paper. Look, he said. He handed it to me. Another drawing. This one was bigger than the one on the fridge. There were a lot more stick figures. I counted quickly. Emma, Lucas, Ben, Maya, Ethan, me, Noah, and 2 tall ones I assumed were my parents. I added everyone, he said proudly. You even remembered Grandpa's glasses, I said. Yeah. He pointed to one of the smaller figures. That's Emma. She's the oldest cousin, right? Yes, she's 10. He pointed to another. That's Lucas. 7. And that one? Maya. 6. He traced his finger across the bottom of the page. Do you think they'll want to play after dinner? Probably. Maybe tag. Maybe. He folded the paper carefully. I'm bringing this, too, he said, for Grandma. He said it casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I nodded. Good idea. The oven timer clicked softly. Outside, a car drove past slowly on our street. Thanksgiving traffic had already started. Ethan checked the time on his phone. I should head to the site. Noah looked up immediately. But we're leaving soon. I'll meet you there, Ethan said. I promise. Noah studied him for a moment. Then he nodded. Okay. Ethan bent down and ruffled his hair. Save me some pie. I will. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. When the front door closed, the house felt quieter. Noah stood at the counter watching the oven. How long does pie take? He asked. About 40 minutes. That's forever. He sat down at the table and began drawing again. I watched him for a moment. His crayons were scattered across the table. Red, blue, green, yellow. The colors moved quickly across the page as he added more details to the house. Windows, a tree, a dog. Kids have a way of building entire worlds with simple lines. Worlds where everyone fits. Worlds where nobody is left out. When the pie finished baking, I set it on the counter to cool. Noah carefully placed his drawing beside it. "Ready?" he said. "For what?" "Thanksgiving." I grabbed my coat. "All right," I said. "Let's go." The drive to my parents' house only took about 20 minutes. The roads were busy but not packed yet. Noah held the pie box carefully on his lap the entire way. He barely spoke. Every few minutes he looked out the window and then back at the drawing he had folded in half. When we turned onto my parents' street, he sat up straighter. "Is that their house?" "Yes." The big white house at the end of the cul-de-sac came into view. The porch lights were already on. 2 cars were parked in the driveway. We pulled up along the curb. Noah took a deep breath. "Okay," he said quietly, like he was preparing himself for something important. I turned off the engine. "You ready?" "Yes." He grabbed the pie box carefully and the folded drawing. Then we walked toward the front door together. Inside the house, I could already hear voices. My sister laughing, kids running somewhere upstairs, dishes clinking in the kitchen. It sounded exactly like every Thanksgiving I remembered growing up. Loud, warm, full. For a moment, standing on the porch, it felt like stepping back into something familiar, something safe. I knocked once. The door opened almost immediately. My mother stood there. "Rachel," she said. Her eyes moved from me to Noah, to the pie box in his hands, and just for a second, something unreadable passed across her face. "Come in," she said. We stepped inside, and the first thing Noah did was look toward the dining room. At the long table already set for dinner, the first thing Noah saw when we stepped inside my parents' house was the dining room. You could see it directly from the front hallway. The long wooden table sat beneath the chandelier exactly the way it always had, polished so carefully it reflected the light above it. Thanksgiving had a certain look in that room. The good dishes were out. The cloth napkins were folded into little triangles, and the center of the table was filled with candles and bowls of cranberries that my mother arranged like decorations. Noah stopped walking. He wasn't staring at the food. He was staring at the table. Kids notice things. Adults pretend not to see. And Noah noticed the chairs. I noticed them too. 12 chairs, neatly spaced. Each one tucked carefully beneath the table. For a moment, I told myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe there were extra chairs in the kitchen. Maybe my mother hadn't finished setting everything up. Behind us, the front door closed. "Rachel!" My sister Olivia appeared from the living room carrying a glass of wine. Her hair looked like it had come straight from a salon. Olivia never arrived anywhere looking unfinished. "Happy Thanksgiving," she said. Then she looked at Noah. "Oh." It wasn't a cruel sound, just a small pause, like someone realizing they'd forgotten something. Noah held the pie box up a little. "I made this," he said. Olivia smiled politely. "That's nice." She stepped aside to let us walk further inside. From the kitchen, my mother called out, "Is that Rachel?" "Yes," Olivia replied. "Good," my mother said. "Tell her to bring the pie in here." Noah looked up at me. "Kitchen?" he asked. "Yes." We walked through the hallway together. The kitchen was crowded the way it always was on holidays. My brother Daniel stood near the sink drinking a beer, while his 2 kids chased each other around the table. Emma and Lucas were already there too, arguing over something on a tablet. When Noah stepped into the room, the kids paused for a second. Then Emma waved. "Hi, Noah." "Hi." He held the pie out toward my mother like an offering. "For you." My mother looked at the box, then at Noah, then back at the pie. "Well," she said, "that was thoughtful." She took the box and set it on the counter. "Desserts go over there," she said, pointing to a side table. Noah nodded quickly. He unfolded the drawing he'd brought. "I made this too," he said. My mother took the paper. She studied it for a moment. Then she placed it beside the pie. "That's nice," she said again. Her voice sounded distracted. Daniel looked over my shoulder. "Hey, kid," he said to Noah. "Ready for turkey?" Noah nodded. "I'm sitting with the cousins." Daniel laughed lightly. "Of course you are." The kids had already gone back to whatever they were doing. Noah hovered near the doorway, unsure where to stand. "Go play upstairs," Emma told him. "We're building a fort." "Okay." He ran up the stairs with the others. His footsteps faded quickly. The kitchen grew quieter. Olivia took a sip of wine. "So," she said casually, "where's Ethan?" "He'll be here soon," I said. "Work thing." "Of course." My mother wiped her hands on a towel. "Dinner will be ready in about 30 minutes. She moved toward the dining room. I followed her. The table looked exactly the same as when I had seen it the week before. 12 chairs, 12 place cards, carefully arranged. My eyes moved across them slowly. Robert, Margaret, Daniel, Olivia, Emma, Lucas, Ben, Maya, Rachel, Ethan. 2 more cards sat near the end. But there was still no card that said Noah. I heard footsteps behind me. Aunt Linda entered the room carrying a bowl of mashed potatoes. She noticed the table, too. Her eyes lingered on the place cards for a moment longer than anyone else's had. "Margaret," she said slowly. "Yes?" "Where's the extra chair?" My mother didn't look up from adjusting a napkin. "We counted already." Linda frowned slightly. "There's one more child here." My mother straightened a candle. "That situation is different." Linda set the bowl down. "He's 9. "Yes." "He's also standing in your house on Thanksgiving." My mother finally turned. "Linda," she said calmly, "let's not start something unnecessary." The words were quiet, but they settled heavily in the room. I felt the air shift, like the moment before a storm when everything suddenly becomes still. Upstairs, the kids ran across the floor, laughing. Their footsteps echoed faintly through the ceiling. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "Turkey's almost done," he said. My mother nodded. "Good." She picked up the stack of place cards and began setting them at each seat, one by one, deliberately. I watched her hands move. Robert, Margaret, Daniel, Olivia, Emma, Lucas, Ben, Maya, Rachel, Ethan. 2 more adults. 12. When she finished, she stepped back. The table was complete. Every seat assigned, every name written, and there was still no place for Noah. At that exact moment, I heard the kids coming down the stairs. Noah appeared in the doorway first. He stopped when he saw the table. His eyes moved across the chairs, slowly. Kids noticed patterns quickly. He counted silently. Then he looked up at me. "Where should I sit?" he asked. The question was simple, hopeful, the kind of question kids ask when they already expect the answer. Before I could speak, Olivia answered, "There isn't a place set for him." The words landed in the center of the room like something heavy dropped onto the floor. Noah blinked. "I can sit anywhere," he said quickly. My mother shook her head slightly. "This table was planned for the grandchildren." Aunt Linda spoke again. "Margaret." But my mother continued, "He isn't actually our grandchild." Noah didn't move. His hands hung at his sides. Behind him, Emma looked confused. "But he's our cousin," she said. The room went very quiet. My mother didn't answer, neither did Olivia. And in that silence, Noah slowly turned his eyes back toward me, waiting. Not for them, for me. For a few seconds, no one moved. The room had gone so quiet that I could hear the clock in the hallway ticking. Noah was still standing near the doorway. His eyes weren't on my mother or Olivia. They were on me. That was the moment that mattered. Kids don't always wait for the people hurting them to explain themselves. They look at the person they trust most, and they watch what that person does next. My mother straightened one of the napkins on the table like nothing unusual had just happened. "Dinner is ready," she said. Daniel pulled a chair out. Olivia picked up her glass again. Emma and Lucas slid into their seats. The table began to fill with people. Everyone seemed suddenly very interested in the food. Noah hadn't moved. "I can sit in the kitchen," he said quietly. He said it quickly, like he had already solved the problem. The words cut through me harder than anything my mother had said. A 9-year-old should never have to negotiate his own place at a table. I walked over to the end of the dining table. The place cards were arranged perfectly. My mother's careful handwriting looked neat and deliberate against the white paper. I picked up the one that said Rachel. Then I picked up the one that said Ethan. My mother looked up. "What are you doing?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached for one of the blank cards sitting beside the candle centerpiece. There had always been extras. My mother liked being prepared. I picked up the pen beside them. The room watched. I could feel it, the pause, the tension. Even the kids sensed something different was happening. Slowly, I wrote one word on the card: Noah. I placed it beside my seat. Then I pulled a chair slightly away from the table. My mother's voice tightened. "Rachel," I looked at her. "Yes, that's not necessary. It seems pretty necessary. We already arranged the seating. You arranged it wrong." Olivia set her glass down. "Oh my God," she muttered. "Can we not do this right now?" I ignored her. My mother crossed her arms. "There are traditions in this family." "No," I said calmly. "There are people in this family." Behind me, Noah still hadn't moved. He was watching every word. Robert cleared his throat. "Rachel," my father said quietly, "you're making this difficult." "I'm making it correct." My mother shook her head. "You're letting emotions interfere with a simple dinner arrangement." I let out a small breath. "A dinner arrangement," I repeated. "Yes. That excludes a child. He's not our grandchild." The sentence landed harder the second time. Emma looked down at her plate. Lucas stared at the floor. Kids understand rejection, even when they don't understand the words. Aunt Linda pushed her chair back slightly. "Margaret," she said firmly, "stop." But my mother was already shaking her head again. "This is not how our family works." I looked at the table, at the chairs, at the carefully written names. Then I looked at Noah. He had gone very still, not crying, not angry, just waiting to see whether he belonged here or not. I reached down and picked up the place card with his name on it. Then I folded it in half. "Okay," I said quietly. My mother seemed satisfied for a split second. Until I picked up my own place card next, then Ethan's. I stacked them together in my hand. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked. I looked at him. "If Noah doesn't have a seat at this table," I said, "then neither do I." The words felt calm when they came out. Not dramatic, just clear. Olivia laughed under her breath. "You're seriously leaving?" "Yes." "For this?" "For him." My father rubbed his forehead. "This is ridiculous." "No," I said. "What's ridiculous is a room full of adults pretending a child doesn't belong here." My mother's voice turned sharp. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" "Yes. It's just dinner." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said, "it isn't." Because the truth was, it had never been about dinner. It was about the line my mother had quietly drawn long before today. A line between blood and everything else. Between who counted and even who didn't. And tonight she had decided that Noah stood on the wrong side of it. I walked over to him. "Get your jacket," I said gently. He blinked. "We're leaving." "Yes." He nodded once. Then he turned and ran toward the hallway. No one tried to stop him. Behind me, chairs scraped. Voices rose. "Rachel, this is absurd. You're embarrassing everyone. You're blowing this out of proportion." I picked up the pumpkin pie Noah had made earlier. It was still sitting untouched on the dessert table. For a moment, I considered taking it with us. Then I changed my mind. I set it down in the middle of the dining table, right between the candles. "You can still have dessert," I said. My mother stared at the pie like it had appeared there by accident. Noah came back wearing his jacket. He stood beside me quietly. "Ready," he said. I took his hand. We walked toward the front door together. Behind us, the dining room buzzed with angry whispers. But no one followed. No one called us back. No one told Noah he was welcome to stay. When the front door opened, cold air rushed inside. Noah stepped onto the porch first. I closed the door behind us. The house suddenly sounded distant, muted, like we had stepped outside a story that was still happening without us. Noah climbed into the passenger seat of the car without speaking. I started the engine. The headlights lit up the quiet street. For the first few minutes of the drive, neither of us said anything. Then Noah finally spoke, very softly. "Did I do something wrong?" I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "No," I said, "not even a little." He looked out the window. "I could have sat in the kitchen," he said. The sentence sounded like an apology. My chest hurt in a way I hadn't expected. "Noah," I said. He turned toward me. "You never have to ask for a place at our table." He nodded slowly, and the rest of the drive home passed in silence. But something had changed. Not just the dinner, not just the holiday. Something deeper. A line had been drawn that night, and for the first time in my life, I had chosen which side of it I was standing on. December arrived quietly, the kind of quiet that follows something unfinished. At first, nothing happened. No phone calls, no messages, no long explanations about Thanksgiving. The silence felt strange. My family had never been quiet people. Growing up, our house had always been full of opinions. My mother believed problems were solved by talking them into submission. My sister Olivia preferred sarcasm. My brother Daniel liked to step in and declare things not worth arguing about, which usually meant he didn't want to take a side. But after Thanksgiving, there was nothing. For almost 2 weeks, the silence stayed exactly where it was. And then the calls began. The first one came on a Tuesday evening while I was grading spelling tests at the kitchen table. Noah was on the floor in the living room building something elaborate out of plastic dinosaurs and blocks. Every few minutes, he narrated the story to himself. Apparently, the dinosaurs were defending a city. My phone buzzed beside the papers. Olivia. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Hello?" "You embarrassed everyone." No greeting, no pause, just the accusation. I leaned back in my chair. "Hello to you too." "Rachel, do you have any idea how uncomfortable Thanksgiving was after you left?" "Uncomfortable?" I repeated. "Yes." I glanced toward the living room. Noah had 2 dinosaurs fighting over a block tower. I imagine it was. "You made a scene in front of the kids." "No," I said calmly. "Mom made a decision in front of the kids." Olivia exhaled sharply. "This again." "Yes," I said, "this again. You could have just ignored it." "I'm not ignoring someone excluding a child." "He's not our family," she snapped. The words were so blunt they almost surprised me. I waited a moment before answering. "He's mine." The line went quiet. Then Olivia said with a laugh that sounded almost tired, "You always do this." "Do what?" "Turn everything into a moral crusade." "It's not a crusade." "Then what is it?" "It's a boundary," she scoffed. "You chose a stepchild over your own parents." I didn't answer right away. Across the room, Noah was now explaining the rules of dinosaur diplomacy to himself. Finally, I said, "No. I chose a child over people who treated him like he didn't exist." Olivia didn't respond. A few seconds later, the line went dead. I set the phone down and returned to grading papers. But the silence in the kitchen felt different now, heavier. 2 days later, Daniel called. He at least began the conversation like a normal person. "Hey," he said. "Hey, you doing okay?" "I'm fine." "Good." There was a pause. I could practically hear him deciding how to approach the topic. "You know Mom's pretty upset." "I'm aware." "She feels like you overreacted." "I disagree." Another pause. "You know she didn't mean it the way it came out," he said. I let out a small breath. "Daniel." "Yeah?" "She said a child wasn't part of the family." "Well," he hesitated. "You know how Mom is about traditions. Traditions don't require excluding people. She just didn't want things to get complicated." I almost laughed. Complicated? Yes. How is adding one chair complicated? It's not the chair, he said. Then what is it? Look, he said. You married Ethan knowing he had a kid. Yes. And Mom just thinks. She thinks what? That situations like that don't always last. The sentence landed quietly. I understood what he was saying, or what he was trying not to say. My mother believed stepfamilies were temporary. If the marriage failed, the child disappeared too. So the solution, I said slowly, is to treat the child like he doesn't belong from the beginning? Daniel sighed. I'm just saying Mom's old-fashioned. That's not old-fashioned, I said. That's cruel. He didn't argue. Instead, he said something else. You know they depend on you. The shift in topic was obvious. For what? I asked. You help them with stuff. I still will if they ask. That's not really what I meant. Of course it wasn't. For years I had done things quietly for my parents, filled out insurance forms, scheduled doctor appointments, picked up medications, and every month I transferred $400 into their account to help with prescription costs, not because they demanded it, because I knew their retirement income didn't stretch far enough. Family helped family. That had always been the rule, until apparently it wasn't. If Mom wants help, I said, she can call me. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You're really not coming for Christmas, are you? I don't know yet. That's going to break Mom's heart. I looked toward the living room again. Noah had knocked over the dinosaur tower and was rebuilding it from scratch. I think Mom already made her choices. Daniel didn't answer. A few seconds later, he said goodbye and hung up. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. We decorated the house for Christmas. Noah insisted on putting the star on top of the tree himself. Ethan pretended the ladder was unstable just to make Noah laugh. For a few weeks, things almost felt normal, until the school called. It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone rang again. This time, the screen showed a different name. Mrs. Alvarez, Noah's teacher. Hi, Rachel, she said gently. Hi, is everything okay? Yes, she said quickly. I just wanted to talk about Noah. My stomach tightened. What happened? Nothing serious, she said. He's just been quieter lately. Quieter? He used to volunteer answers in class. Now he barely raises his hand. I looked toward the living room. Noah was drawing again, crayons scattered across the coffee table. He also sits alone at lunch more often, she added. The words settled slowly. Kids notice things adults try to hide, and sometimes they carry those things into places we can't see. Did something happen recently? She asked. I hesitated. Then I said, Thanksgiving was difficult. Mrs. Alvarez didn't press. Instead, she said something simple. Kids that age often think problems are their fault. That sentence stayed with me long after the call ended. Later that night, while Noah brushed his teeth, I walked into the living room. His drawing was still on the table. This one looked different from the earlier ones. The house was there, the tree, the dog. But there were only two stick figures standing in front of it, Ethan and me. Noah had drawn himself sitting on the porch steps, by himself. I stood there for a long time, looking at the picture, realizing that what had happened at Thanksgiving hadn't ended when we walked out the door. It had followed Noah home, quietly, the way some things do, and somewhere inside me, the part that had been hoping the whole situation would fade away, finally understood something. My family thought the argument was about a dinner table, but it wasn't. It was about what happens to a child after the door closes behind him. By February, the house had settled into a quieter kind of normal. Winter always made our neighborhood feel smaller. Snow narrowed the streets. People stayed inside more. The world moved slower. On Saturday mornings, Noah liked to sit on the living room floor near the heater vent with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders like a cape. He would draw for hours while Ethan and I drank coffee and pretended we were not both watching the same child with quiet concern. He still talked. He still laughed. But the easy confidence he used to carry around had changed slightly. It wasn't obvious unless you knew him well. Sometimes he apologized for things that didn't need apologies. If he spilled juice, if he bumped a chair, once he said sorry because the dog barked too loudly, little things like that. Mrs. Alvarez had been right. Kids have a way of carrying invisible weight. One Wednesday afternoon, I was folding laundry on the couch when my phone buzzed beside me. The screen lit up. Mom, I hadn't heard from her directly since Thanksgiving. For a moment, I just stared at the name. Then I opened the message. It was short. Someone from church thought you should see this. Below the text was an image. I tapped it. The photo filled the screen. For a second, the room felt like it tilted slightly. It was Ethan. There was no doubt about that. He was standing outside a restaurant at night. Streetlights glowed behind him, reflecting in the window beside the door. His jacket looked familiar. So did the angle of his shoulders, and his hand. His hand was resting against the face of a woman standing in front of him, a blonde woman. Their faces were close, too close. They were kissing. My stomach dropped in a way that felt almost physical. The moment lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then something else happened. My mind began noticing details: the restaurant sign, the reflection in the glass, the sleeve of Ethan's jacket. I stood up slowly. "Ethan?" I called. He was in the kitchen helping Noah with spelling homework. I walked in and handed him the phone. "Tell me what I'm looking at." He took the phone without hesitation. For a split second, his face showed confusion. Then he leaned closer to the screen. "This jacket," he said quietly. "Yes. I wore this on our anniversary." He looked up at me. "You remember the place?" I nodded slowly. "The Italian restaurant downtown." He swiped his own phone open. The photo library appeared instantly. Ethan was the kind of person who documented everything: work sites, road trips, random pictures of Noah making ridiculous faces. He typed a date into the search bar, scrolled, stopped. "Here," he said. He turned his phone toward me. The picture was the same. Same streetlight, same angle, same reflection in the window, same moment. Except in the original photo, Ethan wasn't kissing a blonde woman. He was kissing me. The image my mother had sent had been altered. My body had been replaced with someone else. At first glance, it was convincing. But now that I looked closer, the details were obvious. The shadow on the pavement didn't match. The reflection in the glass showed a different silhouette. Even the lighting around the woman's hair looked slightly wrong. Ethan zoomed in. "Look at the reflection," he said. I did. The reflection still showed my dark hair, not the blonde woman's. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Noah looked up from the kitchen table. "Did I spell because right?" he asked. Ethan turned the phone screen down quickly. "You did great," he said. "Go show Rachel." Noah ran over with his worksheet. I forced a smile. "Perfect spelling," I said. "See?" Noah said proudly to Ethan. Then he ran back to the table. When he was out of earshot, Ethan looked at me again. "Your mom sent that." "Yes." He leaned back against the counter slowly. "That's something." I didn't say anything, because what I was feeling wasn't just anger. It was something colder, more deliberate. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone had taken a real photo from our life, altered it, and sent it to me, hoping I would believe my husband had betrayed me. I picked up my phone again and opened the message. The text was still there. "Someone from church thought you should see this." I typed a reply. "Where did you get this?" The response came almost immediately. "People notice things, Rachel." I stared at the screen. "People notice things." Ethan watched me. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. "Not really." He nodded. "That's fair." I set the phone down on the counter. "Can you print both photos?" I asked. "The original and the fake?" "Yes." He didn't ask why. He just walked over to the small printer in the office corner and started working. The machine hummed softly. 2 sheets of paper slid out, one real, one altered. Side by side, they looked almost identical until you knew what you were looking for. Ethan handed them to me. "What are you planning?" he asked. I looked at the pictures, at the careful manipulation, at the quiet cruelty behind the message. "I'm going to ask my mother a question," I said. "What question?" I folded the photos once and slipped them into my coat pocket. Why she thought breaking my marriage would fix her family. Ethan studied my face. "You want me to come with you?" I glanced toward the living room. Noah was still coloring quietly on the floor. "No," I said. "I don't want him anywhere near this." Ethan nodded slowly. "All right." I grabbed my keys. "Rachel," he said. I paused at the door. "I love you," he added. The words landed in the quiet hallway. I looked back at him. "I know." Then I stepped outside into the cold evening air. The drive to my parents' house took exactly 20 minutes, the same 20 minutes I had driven on Thanksgiving. But the road felt very different now. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on. My father's car was there. So was my mother's. I walked up to the door and knocked once. It opened after a few seconds. My father stood there. "Rachel," he said, "I need to talk to Mom." He stepped aside without asking questions. The house smelled faintly like the same lemon polish it always had. My mother was sitting at the dining table, the same table where the place cards had been, the same table where Noah had stood waiting. I walked over and placed the two photos on the table in front of her, side by side. "Did you try to break up my marriage?" I asked. She looked down at the pictures, then up at me, and after a moment she said, "I was protecting you." For a moment, I didn't respond. The words sat there between us like something heavy dropped onto the table. "I was protecting you." My mother said it calmly, almost patiently, as if the explanation should have been obvious. The dining room looked exactly the same as it had on Thanksgiving night. Same table, same chandelier, same quiet house. Only now there were no candles, no plates, no carefully written place cards, just the two photos lying side by side on the polished wood, one real, one altered. My father remained near the doorway behind me. I could hear the faint sound of the television from the living room, but he didn't turn it up or down. He simply stayed there, listening. I pulled out the chair across from my mother and sat down. "You were protecting me," I repeated. "Yes. By sending me a fake picture of my husband cheating?" She lifted one of the photos between her fingers. "You say fake?" "It is fake." She studied the image quietly. "Maybe that one is," she said. The way she said it made something cold move through my chest. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said carefully, "that situations like this rarely end the way you think they will. You altered a photograph. I showed you what your future could look like." I stared at her. "You tried to make me doubt my marriage." My father shifted slightly behind me. "Rachel," he said quietly, but my mother raised her hand, stopping him. "No," she said, "let her ask." So I did. "Why?" My mother placed the altered photo back on the table. "Because you're making a mistake." "What mistake?" She leaned back in her chair. "Building your life around people who are not actually your family." The words sounded almost rehearsed. "You mean Ethan and the boy." The way she said "the boy" made my stomach tighten. "His name is Noah." "Yes." "And he's 9. That doesn't change the facts." "What facts?" My mother folded her hands together. "You married a man who already had a child. You stepped into a complicated situation that isn't permanent." "Isn't permanent?" "No." "Ethan's wife died," I said quietly. "I'm aware." "Then what exactly do you think is temporary?" She looked at me with a kind of sad patience. "Men leave," she said. The sentence came out flat, like a statement she had believed for a very long time. "When they do," she continued, "that child disappears too." My father sighed softly behind me. But he didn't contradict her. So you thought the best solution, I said slowly, was to sabotage my marriage first. I was preparing you. For what? For reality. I looked down at the two photos again, side by side, truth and manipulation printed on identical sheets of paper. You didn't even hesitate, I said. What do you mean? You didn't ask me if I was happy. You are confused. You didn't ask me if Ethan treats Noah well. That's not the point. You didn't ask if I love them. My mother's expression hardened slightly. You're letting emotions blind you. I let out a short breath. You know what's interesting? She didn't answer. You spent my entire childhood teaching me that family takes care of each other. Yes, you said that all the time, because it's true. But apparently it only applies to people who share the right blood. My mother's voice sharpened. Blood matters. I nodded slowly. That explains Thanksgiving. My father stepped forward slightly. Rachel, maybe we should calm down. No, I said without turning around. We should finish this conversation. I looked back at my mother. You excluded Noah from your table. He isn't my grandson. You sent me a fake photo to break my marriage. I was protecting you. You call that protection? She met my eyes without hesitation. Yes. Something in my chest settled in that moment. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. I pushed the two photos across the table toward her. You know what the strange part is? I said. What? You still think you're the one protecting this family. She didn't respond. But what you're actually protecting, I continued, is a rule. What rule? That love only counts if it comes from the right people. My father rubbed his temples. This conversation isn't helping anyone. It helps me, I said, because suddenly everything made sense. The place cards, the missing chair, the careful distance my mother had always kept around Noah. It had never been about the dinner, it had never been about Thanksgiving, it had been about a belief she carried quietly for years. That family was something fixed, closed, defined by bloodlines and last names, and that everything else was temporary, even love. I stood up slowly. My chair scraped lightly against the floor. My mother looked up. Where are you going? Home. You're just leaving? Yes? You're overreacting again. No, I said calmly. I'm finishing something. My father looked uneasy. What does that mean? It means I'm done trying to convince you that a child deserves kindness. My mother shook her head. You're choosing strangers over your own parents. I paused beside the table. Then I looked back at her. No, I said, I'm choosing the people who actually act like family. The words hung in the air. My mother didn't respond. She simply stared at the photos. I walked to the front door and opened it. Cold air rushed inside. Before stepping out, I turned once more. Mom. She looked up. You were right about one thing. What? People do leave. I held her gaze for a moment. But sometimes they leave because they finally see who was willing to push them away. Then I stepped outside. The porch light flickered slightly in the wind. Behind me, the door closed quietly. And for the first time since Thanksgiving, the silence between my parents and me didn't feel uncertain. It felt final. Summer arrived slowly that year, not with a single warm day, but in small changes that crept in over weeks. The snow melted from the sidewalks, the trees along our street turned green again, and Noah stopped wearing his jacket every time he stepped outside. Life inside our house had settled into something simpler, quieter, cleaner. There were still difficult days. Mrs. Alvarez said it takes time for children to rebuild confidence after they feel rejected. She explained it gently during a conference at the school, sitting across from me with Noah's drawings spread across the desk. He's very observant, she said. I know. He notices when people treat him differently. I know that too, but she also smiled. He's starting to speak up in class again. That had been happening slowly. First he raised his hand once, then twice. Then one day he volunteered to read a whole paragraph out loud. Small victories. The kind adults sometimes overlook, but kids feel them like mountains. At home, Ethan and I didn't talk about my parents very often, not because we were avoiding the subject, because there wasn't much left to say. The phone stopped ringing. The messages stopped arriving. Silence became permanent. At first, it felt strange. Then it felt peaceful. One Saturday morning in early June, Noah burst through the front door with a scraped knee and dirt on both hands. "I crashed," he announced. Ethan looked up from the kitchen. "You crashed?" My scooter flipped. "Did you win the fight?" "No." "Well," Ethan said, "next time fight smarter." Noah laughed. Then he looked toward me. "Rachel?" "Yes?" "I need a bandage." I grabbed the small first aid kit from the drawer. "Sit down." He climbed onto the kitchen chair while I cleaned the scrape. It wasn't serious, just a shallow cut with a little gravel stuck to the skin. Kids heal quickly. "What happened?" I asked. "I tried to jump the curb." "Did it work?" "No." "That explains the crash." He watched carefully as I placed the bandage across his knee. For a moment, he was quiet. Then he said something that made me pause. "Mom, can you hand me the scissors?" The word landed so softly that at first I wasn't sure I'd heard it correctly. Mom. He seemed to realize it at the same time I did. His eyes widened slightly. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Noah looked down at the table. "I mean, it's okay," I said gently. He looked up again. "You didn't mind?" "No, because I still have another mom." "I know." He nodded slowly. "She'll always be my mom." "Yes. And you're—" He hesitated. "Here." The word sounded small, but it carried more meaning than he probably understood. "I'm here," I said. "That's enough." He smiled. Then he said it again. "Thanks, Mom." This time, he didn't correct himself. Ethan had been standing by the sink the whole time. He pretended to be very interested in washing the same plate twice, but I could see the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Later that afternoon, Noah disappeared into the living room with his crayons again. Some habits never change. I was folding laundry on the couch when he walked back in, holding a sheet of paper. "I made something." "Another drawing?" "Yes." He handed it to me. 3 stick figures stood in front of a house. The drawing looked familiar, but it wasn't the same one from the fridge months earlier. This house had a lake beside it, and a small dock. Behind the figures there were trees and a bright yellow sun. I recognized the place immediately. It was the little cabin we had rented for the weekend, our first real family trip since Thanksgiving. "What's it say?" I asked. Noah pointed to the words written above the picture. His letters were still uneven, but the message was clear. "The family that stayed." I felt something warm move through my chest. "Do you like it?" he asked. "I love it." He nodded. Then he ran outside again to show Ethan. I stayed on the couch for a moment longer, looking at the drawing. Families don't always break the way people expect. Sometimes they shrink. Sometimes they change shape. Sometimes the people you thought would always be there step back and close a door. But sometimes something else happens too. Something quieter. Something stronger. The people who remain build something new in the space that's left behind. Not perfect, not traditional, but real. Outside, Noah's laughter carried across the yard. Ethan shouted something about scooters and helmets. I stood up and walked toward the door. The drawing was still in my hand. 3 people, 1 house, a lake, and a sentence written in a child's careful handwriting, "The family that stayed." And for the first time in a long time, the word family felt simple again.